Hi, Det. I am so excited that we are going to have this conversation about fueling a body even when one is done playing professional sports. And I'm going to get into asking you a lot of questions, but I think this really dovetails beautifully with the profession that you are in right now, where right it is investing. And so that investing isn't necessarily from a financial side. This is the self-investment for your ROI, is what are you getting out of it and why do you do these things? So let's just dive right into this. And, as a starting point, I think for our audience would love to know, and I'm nosy, so I want to know too, is tell me when you played. So when you were a professional player, what kinds of foods impacted your performance on the court? That's the first question.
Well, thanks, Leslie. Thank you for having me. I'm excited about speaking of just in general about health and wellness, and like you mentioned, the investment side, having money to live a thoughtful, productive life is important. But if you don't have your health, it doesn't really matter. So, um, the question you asked about, what I did way back when, if I can still remember that, I wish I had someone like you to help me out along the way. I think to some degree I was fortunate that I couldn't, or I noticed that I couldn't eat like a lot of my teammates did. When I was in college, high school is a whole nother story. That's basically just surviving, eating whatever you could find. And even partially in college, it was I didn't have any money, so I could not go out and shop for healthy food. It was basically wherever you can get a free meal, whether it was a burger or whatever, you just fed yourself. And in college, I remember our pregame meal was a huge T-bone steak and a baked potato with all the fixing, because people said you got to load up, you got to load up protein, carbs, and so once I got started in the pros, it was similar the first couple of years. You just ate whatever you wanted to. I was young and dumb. But I noticed later on, a few years later, that, when I didn't eat well, so when I did go out and ate the burgers and had, a handful of beers or something, I was not as productive the next day. And I had always had an issue maintaining my weight, practicing and playing a lot, so burning a lot of calories. So I was at a stage where I was feeding myself with tons of protein shakes, and just putting all these calories in me, and my stomach was always upset. So, I paid a little bit more attention to it, and I got away from doing a lot of dairy, doing a lot of beef, and picking more cleaner proteins, which was chicken and fish. I was fortunate enough that I love fish. My wife and I, both from Germany, but we've traveled the world. We've been everywhere. We've tried every food. We like every food. I would say 95% of it. So I had no problem, eating raw fish, sushi, or whatever it is over the years. And I think that was just extremely helpful that I realized I feel a lot better when I eat clean. Um, and I never liked fried food. I didn't like, all the fried fish or whatever. So from that regard, I think I was just fortunate that I had a certain taste for what I liked and what I didn't.
And I love what you're saying, because I think a lot of times when people think about eating for performance, is they categorize food. This is good, this is bad. This is healthy, it's not healthy. But I think the more important thing that you said is, how does it feel in my body? Because if our body doesn't feel good, it's really hard to optimize performance. And that, to me, I say it all the time as a sport dietitian, we have to personalize to figure out what works for us. And sometimes that idea of what traditionally it was the pregame meal, like, oh, enormous. Now get out there and run up and down the court, and your body's like, what are you thinking? What are we doing? And so that lightening of the meal and the difference in having more fish, what a great thing. It's still that wonderful amount of protein, but without all the added things that tend to bog the body down. So I think that that's so critically important. Oh, another question for you is, after games. So what would your routine typically be? To me, this is the really telling time is recovery because, right, we're in a state of prepare for, repair from. There's no third door. Those are the doors. So did you have any particular strategies that you use from a recovery aspect?
I think I could have recovered a lot better if I actually had, input. But I was kind of like the trial and error guy, right? Because again, early on in my career, you'd eat whatever you could find. I was fortunate enough to invest in a couple restaurants here in the Seattle market. I remember going to one of those restaurants, which is a steakhouse, after weekend games when we had a babysitter. You roll in there at 11 p.m. You eat a 16-ounce steak with everything and appetizers and all that kind of stuff, right? And thankfully I was still fairly young at the time, but I knew the next morning was always a sluggish practice. The red wine probably had something to do with it, but it's those things where you didn't really know. We didn't have a nutritionist. And even later on in my career, when we did have a nutritionist, the training table, the last 2, 3 years, it was still all carbs. It was, tons of pastas with sauces. And it was like, you guys got to load up. You guys got to load up. And, I had plenty of teammates who would not eat that food, but rather go through the McDonald's drive-through. And I'm still going, how did they compete every day? I had one all-star teammate who literally drank every day, right? He drank Crown every day. And I'm kind of going, how do you operate, right? How do you achieve your best? And their argument was, hey man, I'm an all-star, right? And you kind of go, yeah, but how about long term? Can you maintain that? You have all this talent. Can you maintain that for the next 2, 3, 5 years? Could you play 5 more years because you're maxing out, what your body can do? So I always looked at that I had to max out my physical being and feed it the right way, or my career would have been a lot shorter. And that just transitioned into maybe a healthier lifestyle, and also realizing that, hey, if I want to be healthy in my 40s, 50s, 60s, I got to make some compromises.
I love that. And again, I think that that is so important because that's future casting. That's what that is. It's not, I'm just not thinking about the moment and what's happening now, but what is going to sustain me. I'm all about sustainable. We talk about that a lot from a nutrition perspective and environment perspective, but it's self-sustainability. Am I doing the things now that are going to enable me to do the things I want to do when I get older, right? To be the husband you want to be the father you want to be the professional you want to be. All of those things require that we've made that investment in our health and that attention to detail that you put forth. That has nothing to do with your talent. That's just, okay, it's above and beyond what's happening on the court. So I think that's fantastic. So you kind of alluded to this, but if we could go back in time and think about from the beginning of your professional career, of your collegiate career, if you could change it, rewrite the script, what would you have done differently from a nutrition perspective?
Oh gosh, not just that. There's so many things, right? I don't have any
A
regrets.
life perspective is like that.
Yeah, I said I don't have any regrets of how I attacked it because I feel like I gave 100% of my ability, right? I worked hard at it. I did the research I could, trying to figure out how could I maximize what I had. But it was very limited. So definitely on the nutrition side, actually having a plan, because even if you eat fairly healthy, and that's all relative, but thinking back 30 years of what was fairly healthy is probably nowadays going, oh my God, you ate that 3 times a week, right? Um, but if I could go back and say, if I had that maximized that and also figured out how to incorporate that with proper recovery, because there are days where you didn't feel like you did anything wrong and you showed up at a game and you literally operated at 60% of capacity because your body was just done. We play 4 days in a row, 4 days and 5 nights in four different cities. And even though you might have tried to sleep and eat well, your body was just done. You couldn't even get your heart rate up, and you were sluggish, and just trying to coordinate all those things: travel, nutrition, um, rest, and the same with proper training. The way we trained back then, nowadays nobody trains that way. Probably that's why all my joints are a mess, right? Because we lifted like football players, all those things, right? But nutrition to me is the key for, I can replace, which I have from some parts of my body, but you can't replace your engine, without some major setbacks. So nutrition to me going forward is probably the most important thing.
I love that. And I think what you've just said also speaks to the point of it takes a village, right? It isn't just one aspect of play, it's everything. Did I do something to get myself ready so that I can play through and recover? Because guess what? I have to do it again tomorrow, and maybe I'm on a plane, and there's all these different variables that are there. And it gets to that point of what I find a lot of times people say nutrition, it's just food. Well, let's think about timing. How many times a day do you eat? How consistent are you with that? What's happening with your hydration? What are you doing in terms of sleep? It's not one of those. It literally is all, it's a whole team within one body trying to figure this out to have everything going in that same direction. And you've just said that beautifully, that indeed that is the case, and not just through playing days, for life. We're kind of establishing that team for life. So now, not playing professional basketball anymore. But what do you do now in order to maintain that healthy lifestyle?
Yeah, it's again, I'll try. Nothing is perfect, and especially when you travel. I travel a lot for work and also for pleasure. It's, you go through an airport early in the morning, there are just no good choices. I don't care what you say. Especially I have some restrictions, where I don't do gluten or I don't do dairy, and so you run into stuff. Okay, I am hungry. I got a big body to feed. I got to put something in me, and all right, today's a compromise. I'm just going to eat that and live with it, right? But overall, I noticed that first of all, I don't drink much anyways, and I feel much better when I don't drink. So I limit myself quite a bit. Um, I like a good glass of wine, but if it's more than one and a half, I don't sleep. So I try to restrict myself, and that sometimes is not fun because you're in a fun setting with people having a great dinner or a party, and everyone is like, the final one more or whatever it is. And I kind of go, I'm going to sparkling water, right? Because I love my mornings. I love getting up, being sharp, having my cup of coffee, and ready to go. I don't like to be sluggish. I don't like to sit at work. I'd work early in the morning. I'd go through my emails, and I don't like to reread my emails because I forgot what it said. And it's not that I had too much to drink. It's just that the older you get, there's more fog around you. Or you go to dinner and everything that's served is stuff you usually don't eat, but you're hungry and I want to eat it. And then I notice I don't sleep well, and I'm feel in the morning like I've actually had, too much to drink. Um, so it's maybe not as fun. I see other people not doing it, and they say, "Hey, I'm feeling great," and I go, "Well, maybe it's genetics, so maybe I train myself to to live this way." But I'm willing to make that compromise because I love my mornings. I love being active. I do something almost every day, whether it's a workout, a spin bike, lifting. It's something, right? Or just walking the golf course. Just keep moving. To me, is keep moving and fuel yourself with decent stuff. It doesn't have to be perfect every time, but fuel yourself with the right things, and I think it just hopefully lasts longer. Where I don't want to be sitting on the couch every day when I'm 70, right? I want to keep moving, so that's my goal.
I love it. Living swell. I think that's the goal for all of us. And it's not about being perfect, but it's about doing the things that we can and what we can control. This hand to mouth activity, the sleeping activity, the moving activity. Nobody else can do it for us. We make that choice. One of my mottos is always, I am keeping on. It's not about keeping up with everybody else, but I'm keeping on to allow myself to do the things that I want to do. So I love hearing that from you. Okay, so kind of the last question is, what do you love about having seafood?
Well, I think I'm lucky that I enjoy the taste of probably at least 90% of it. Every once in a while you have the fishy mussel or clam that you kind of go, well, that's not good. But I love the taste of, last night I took some WNBA players to dinner that are in town, and I took them to my favorite seafood place here in Seattle, and Linda knows it. And they all had black cod and they had salmon and tuna, and everyone was like, "Wow, this is amazing," right? And even though don't eat seafood every day, they really appreciated how good the food was. And yes, being at one of the best restaurants in Seattle is not like you go into the store and fixing your own food, but to me, it's like I love the taste of it. Um, and prepare it the right way. We do a lot of salmon because we're in the Northwest, and in the summertime, we like to barbecue salmon or cook it in different ways. Um, and that's one. I think it's also, we have a challenge in the whole world of how do we sustain not just seafood, but overall, how do we feed our people, right? Um, to me, figuring out how we one is feed our people, but also make seafood sustainable is a challenge. But people are up to it; they're working on it. The farming is getting better and better. And when you have the snobs tell you, "Oh, I can tell you what's a wild salmon or what's a farmed salmon," I go, "Well, let me cook both of them for you, and you tell me which is which," because it's all about how you prepare it, right? It's almost like somebody can tell you what's the difference between $1,000 bottle of wine and $100 bottle of wine, and tell you, well, there may be one in a million snobs that can figure that one out, right? So I think those are the challenges we have as a race. How do we feed our billions of people? But seafood, to me is a way of making it sustainable, and nutrition is the key to all of our health. So
I love talking with you. You are truly an aficionado, and really living this life of being sufficient, and also, and I really right there with you. It is about the give to, give back, give on, because I think for all of us, that's what's going to bring us all together. Yeah, less of this enragement and more of the engagement each and every day. I think that's the recipe for living a healthy life. Thank you so very, very much. I love chatting with you.
thanks for having me, Leslie.